Hey, Phil. Just wondering how much new parts of your offense that you hope to install during spring ball. And if you did want to install some new pieces, how do you handle that now, and kind of what's the game plan with that moving toward the season?
Greg, I would say this probably works offensively in our favor this year more than maybe some other places because, like even in our offensive staff meeting this morning, our coaches are a little bit relieved because we have the offense in. And, I've been saying to media all winter, we've got 35 coaches coming back on top of the 4 coaches that I have that are full-time because we've got 35 veteran players coming back that know the offense. So when our young guys, the 25 new young guys that come in, turn around in back of the line of a drill or something that we're doing, I've got a whole slew of receivers or linemen or running backs there that can teach them because they already know it. And so it's a benefit for us. I mean, we would much rather have spring ball and get the reps and get the physicality and do all of those things, but we're not reinventing the offense. We're not installing all kinds of new stuff. So we're probably ahead of the game mentally, and I think we'll probably get into the groove a little bit sooner in camp in August than some others would because the offense hasn't changed. So as long as Sam Howell is here, the offense will be what he knows right now. We're just going to keep working on getting better at it with him, and that's true for every position in the offense.
Anything to follow up with, Greg?
Yeah, Phil, along those lines, is this kind of one of the silver linings with your setup in terms of only having, 28 or whatever it is concepts, so it's not overloading the players anyway?
We're trying to get to a point where they're playing instinctively, and in order to do that, they've got to be able to do this with their eyes closed or without having to think, and we want them to be able to snap the football and go play really, really fast. And you can only do that when things come instinctively to you. And so it is. It's designed that way. It's definitely the silver lining with the issue that's going on right now. And we'll still have to recover mentally and recover physically, just like everybody else in the nation when we get back. But I think the mental curve is going to be much shorter, just because that's always been an advantage in this offense. Did that answer your question?
All right, we'll go to Ross here. Stop doing stuff, Ross. Let me do it. There we go.
All right. Hey, Coach. I was just wondering kind of what your day-to-day is now on an average work day in terms of meetings and time you spend with staff and players, et cetera. Can you kind of walk us through your day-to-day?
Truthfully, my wife coached women's Division I basketball for 15 years, so she's used to the grind that I have at work. So to take my day and bring it home at times is no shock to her because she already knows the schedule. So this has actually been, it's terrible, the people who have passed from this virus, and we pray every day for the people who are sick. But the only thing that I can control right now is what my day is like every day. And so we're trying to make the best of things. And that's just always been my approach. That's Mac's approach. So, we're very similar in that aspect. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is I basically sat down with Tanya, my wife, and said, how are we going to handle this incredibly different schedule with all the issues that are going on? And, we came to the conclusion that we could do something different, Ross, but we said, you know what, how possible would it be for our everyday routine to stay the same? So as much as we can do to keep it the same, I still get up at 4:30, I still hit the heavy bag at 5 o'clock. I still shower at the same time and I go to work. My wife is homeschooling our kids in the morning. So up until 12 o'clock, I can never come home anyway without interrupting school. So I get 5 to 6 hours every morning, and all I do is watch film and game plan and prep for our opponents. I meet with players. So we have regimented meetings, legal meetings with our players as position coaches and coordinators. throughout the week, just like we would if we were in spring ball. Obviously, you're not watching previous film of spring practice. That's the deficit to everything that's happening. But we're still talking about X and O. We're still watching UCF and Auburn and all those teams defensively. And then when we meet as a staff, we're still talking about a lot of the same things. So in my home anyway, we tried to keep things fairly similar to the way they were before, because that's the productive routine that we had. And we're trying to do our best to keep that routine with our players right now as best we can without actually seeing them every day. Much like I'm sure many of you are with your work.
Anything to follow up with, Ross?
Yeah, so you meet with the players every day and coaches every day, or do you have times for those?
There's 2 days a week where we meet as an offensive staff. There's 2 days a week where we definitely meet as a full-time staff. In some cases, it's much more than that, just because we're going to address something that's just come up. That's the one thing about this scenario right now. The NCAA rules change daily. The things that we're allowed to do and not allowed to do on campus or with our players changes often. And so every time there's a change, we just re-game plan the situation. And so we have to meet to do that. And I think the fact that we're proactive and we're on top of it, the minute that there's a change, we get together, we're talking about it. And then I have individual meetings with the offensive coaches, and I have individual meetings with players in every position. And then we have positional meetings. We're allowed 4 hours a week right now. And 4 hours doesn't sound like a lot of time, but when you're not on the field and you don't have film to evaluate, you can get a lot of other things done in 4 hours.
All right. Andrew, you're up.
Hey, Coach, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Going back to Greg's question about installing the offense, we hear a lot about player-led practices in that 8-week stretch leading up to spring practice. How much 11-on-11 install can the kids actually accomplish on their own, which if you would have had practice would have minimized how much you had to do, and certainly would be something that they could pick up again whenever they can resume some kind of normalcy back in Chapel Hill this summer? How much can they actually do themselves, which is a full install?
Really most of it. And I think that the big challenge for the staff in this system is to learn it like I know it, and they're professionals, so they did, and then to teach it to the players and get them to a point where they mentally like we do. So one of the things that we do during the year, not to go off on a tangent here, but we do all of our meeting and all of our preparation in the morning. And so after the coaches work out and go to lunch, the afternoons are free of me every day. And the reason of that, I don't hold any offensive meetings in the afternoons because I want to allot and provide as much time for our coaches to meet with players one-on-one or two-on-one or three-on-one to go over the stuff mentally. And now we have most of the team on offense coming back, and they know their position. They know what they're doing. They're able to teach the young guys. So when we go into PLPs, player-led practices, that's another area that I firmly believe we have a big advantage over some other programs because we're not nearly as sophisticated, and the guys can actually run a full player-led practice without the coaches. Now, you might say, well, what's the importance of the coaches then? We don't have to coach effort, and we want to get to a point where we don't have to coach the knowledge part of the X's and O's, but we're constantly improving tempo, we're constantly improving technique, we're constantly addressing the physicality, you know what I mean? And we're constantly coaching the finer things of a particular play that kids aren't going to learn unless we share it with them. And so anytime that you lose reps, Andrew, anytime you lose reps, you digress. It's just like all of us. If we didn't ride a bike for 20 years, they say you never forget, but it's a lot harder to go back and do it like you did 20 years ago if you take a huge break. And so this is a break we're not used to. I adjusted our spring ball, 15-day spring ball planning for what was being talked about was going to be a 10-day mini camp in June. So I kind of scaled it down and plugged it into a 10-day mini camp. Now it doesn't look like anything's going to happen in June. And so we're kind of refocusing our spring ball script into August. It's going to be like the old days where you didn't see players in the summertime and you hope they were working out and you hope they came to camp in shape. And so we're doing our best right now through Coach Hess to make sure our guys are training so we don't have the injuries that come with players coming to camp that aren't physically ready for it. And then mentally, we're doing all of our stuff in meetings right now. And so you'd like to plug in the physical part of Hess and the mental part of our staff and be able to just go to work in August. And that's our plan right now.
Follow-up, is the biggest concern that you have just the lack of actual reps with the defense there and some of the physicality you're able to get in during an actual spring practice?
You lose timing, and as beautiful as any play might work on air, it never looks anywhere near as good when 11 people are hitting you and trying to stop you from executing. So when you don't have reps against the defense and you don't have reps at full speed, no matter how much we want to try to replicate that in practice, or the kids are going to try to replicate that in PLPs, you can't mirror that until you get back into that exact situation. So the one good thing is the issue that I think we're losing right now with not having spring ball, everybody is losing. So we all have the same deficit right now, and we're trying to make sure that we gain ground in the other aspects of preparing for the season.
Brian, where are you? There you are, Brian. Brian Keys, go ahead.
Yeah, continuing on with sort of what Greg asked, but were there any young guys coming in that you really wanted to get a chance to look at that you thought maybe might get some reps early on in the season that you just haven't been able to see as much now?
Well, I think you're asking the question that is my number one concern. My number one concern is the younger players that are coming in, whether they were here last year and didn't play for us and now are going to play a more important role, or the freshmen that came in mid-year who are now missing spring ball. And that's the greatest value of spring ball are the new guys. And then we have 12, that's 13 guys that came mid-year, and then we have 12 that would have started in summer one in May or June. So it's the 25 newcomers and the 3 or 4 guys that didn't play much last year that may have a bigger role this year. Those are the ones I think that are being cheated by this whole process. And those are the ones that I think I spend the most time communicating with, and as a staff, we spend the most time talking about, in an effort to have the best strategy to address preparing them for August. There's a couple players every year that come in, they have a great spring, and because of those reps, they prepare themselves to be able to play in the fall. Sam Howell is a perfect example. I can't imagine where he would have been in the South Carolina game had he never had spring ball last year. Spring ball was a huge part of his development. So that's my number one concern, is to stay on top of the guys, particularly the ones that we earmark. Like, we all know Josh Downs athletically is probably good enough to play for us right now. Now, he still has to put pads on and prove that, and spring ball would have given him that opportunity. And if we were all wrong, we would have seen that in spring ball. Hey, you know what? He needs another year to develop. But if what we felt about him in particular was true, we would have seen that in spring ball. Now that's a question we're going to have to answer in August. So the development of our young guys that we felt were going to be impactful to this year's success, those are the guys that I'm most concerned with. I'm not worried, but I think we have to do the best job developing them in the fall, and that's going to be a big part of our priority with regards to our planning on offense, and developing those guys in August so that they're ready to play on opening day against Central Florida.
You good, Brian?
And then are there just any other specific names outside of Josh?
I think we expect Austin Richards to have an impact up front. We've got a number of guys that we're going to roll through. Ryan Anderson did a good job at center. He's being pushed by Tyler Murray. We're kind of excited about Jonathan Adorno taking snaps there. So, that's a position that we would love to have created a 3-man or 4-man competition for. We wanted to see Josh's development. Emery Simmons is a returning player who has very, very slowly but surely gotten better every day. And so we're curious to see where he would plug in this spring. there's a number of guys. We lost Antonio Williams, so who's going to step up and be the third back that we like to play in every game? We've got one returning tight end in Garrett Walston, so we obviously want to play at least two. And we've got a bunch of young guys coming in Kamari and Kendall and Copenhagen. So, those are some questions that could have been answered in the spring. And it's not a dire situation, but those are all questions and competitions and developments that are going to happen in August camp now.
Luke Buxton, go ahead.
So Tommy Haddon, former UNC offensive lineman, worked on the startup Learn to Win, which kind of helps coaches build lessons and install schemes via the app. I know Bateman uses it, and you don't. Given this time, is there any thought to pivot towards the app?
Hey, can you repeat that because you're breaking up?
Yeah, so Tommy Haddon, former offensive lineman for UNC, is now working on a startup Learn to Win. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Bateman uses it. So it's basically a technology that allows coaches to build lessons and install schemes via like online technology. Bateman uses it on the defense end. I know you have it. Is there any thought to maybe go virtual and build out that app and talk to Bateman, or have you just not even heard of it? No clue.
I haven't heard. It doesn't sound like and now that you brought it to my attention, I'll probably do a little research on it. But we want our players to be coached by our guys. You know what I mean? And without really understanding exactly what it is, it's hard for me to comment on. I think if there was a legal avenue to get something that we're doing worked on, and we felt it was helpful, we'd certainly look into it. I think I would probably stop short of sharing the things that we do schematically and all that with an outside entity, if that's what we're talking about. Our guys were hired to coach our players, and we want them hearing what we're doing from them. But again, it's hard for me really to comment above and beyond that because I don't know a lot about it. If anything, if you wouldn't mind sharing it with me afterwards, I'd like to get some info, and then I can do some research.
I got you.
Yeah, Coach, I'll send you the article.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I don't mean to be so vague. It's just hard to really have an opinion on something I don't know anything about.
No, I understand. I thought you may have heard of it, but I totally understand given the circumstance.
Luke DeCock.
Hey Phil, I'm just curious. What's Sam's homework assignment like right now? What do you kind of have him doing, and what's on his agenda?
We're putting Sam and Jace to work now. Jace Reuter mentally is where Sam is in terms of understanding the offense. I think where Jace would fall behind Sam is the experience of actually executing it for 13 games the way Sam did. But from a meeting standpoint, I meet with the two of them together. And part of Sam's homework assignment is the big advantage to what we do on offense is that it really there are answers built in what we run. And so one of the things that is part of our overall 4 year development plan for quarterbacks in particular, because you asked about Sam, is preparing them if they're good enough for the next level. And so going into a sophomore year of a player that played or that started like Sam did, we're now looking at all of the NFL defenses, one team at a time. We're calling our offense against those defenses, and we're verbalizing like we always do during the season. We're going through games and talking about, hey, what will we run here and how will we execute it against, say, the Eagles goal line defense from game 4. And it's great mental work. And what's happening is we're covering a lot of scenarios in the game of football that don't always come up. They're more obscure, but it's giving us an opportunity to hit them all. And I have them in a checklist, and we could sit and go through them in checklist order to address them all, and we do that. But it's a lot more realistic when we watch a game in game speed. And I call a play or signal it to him on Zoom, and he can look at it and say, hey, coach, I go here, here, and here. Here's why. And, I protect myself this way. So that's what we're doing right now. We're kind of in the NFL phase of the development process with Sam and in our system.
Anything to follow up with, Luke?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Jeremy.
Greg, where are you at? Gregory Hall, go ahead.
Phil, I was just kind of curious how you expected the kind of competition among the wide receivers this spring and heading into the season. Just obviously, Jami, Dak, Daz, Bo, but then you mentioned guys like Josh Downs. Just kind of curious your expectations of the competition among those guys.
Well, we always want depth at every position. So it's hard to say we want it in more at one position than any other. But the benefit when you just look at the receiver room and you realize you're starting to develop the depth that you want to have at that position, it allows for us. I would much rather have 6, 7, 8 receivers that can play for us right now. I mean, we all would, but there are a number of offenses out there that would not take advantage of that. There are some out there right now that aren't taking advantage of having 3 really, really good receivers. So we are 3 and 4 wide all the time, and we would rather have Diami get 55, 60 reps in a game and score his 2 touchdowns and collect his 150 yards than we would have him play 80 or 90 reps and produce the same way. Playing more doesn't necessarily mean the production goes up. Playing more beyond a fatigue level means sometimes you're playing more rep-wise, but the production is the same because you're playing, at a more fatigue rate. So Diami Brown, 60 plays at 100% is a lot better than Diami Brown, 90 plays at 80%. And so when does the depth really help you? When you can roll somebody out there that can go play and make plays and do some things and allow Diami to stay fresh so that when he comes back out on the field, he's just as effective. And really you're not losing much when he goes off. It's hard to replace him athletically. But when I say you're not losing much, we still have a receiver out there who can execute at a high level. And I think last year we had 4.5 guys at receiver that I felt like could start or play for any time. And this year we're going to have 6 or 7 at the least. And that gives us great depth at every position. It means we can stay fresh all game in our tempo. And it also means that to be the starter here now, you're going to have to compete more and practice at an even higher level than last year because there are more people behind you looking to take your job. And they're always looking to take your job, but now they're looking to take your job and they have the ability to actually do it. And there's a difference there. Everybody behind you wants to start, but now they're good enough, they're athletic enough to threaten for reps. And that's going to make Diami and the rest of them, I just use him as an example, a lot sharper than they were before because that's what they're going to need to do to maintain the playing time that they want.
All right, gang. Did you have something else?
Yeah, and then obviously Diami and Daz with 1,000 yards kind of proved themselves. But what do you want to see out of Bo Corrales, Antoine Green, some of those guys? Like, what do you want to see out of them to be able to contribute even more?
Well, with Diami and Daz, we got over 1,000 yards of production. With Antoine Green / Bo Corrales, the production from the 2 of them playing the same position was over 900 yards. And they're different athletes. They're not going to make the same type of plays that Diami and Daz. But I would like to see those 2, Antoine and Bo, do the same thing we expect from all of them. We'd like to catch the ball more consistently. We need to have fewer drops this year. And I think the year has given us an opportunity to know what strengths the guys have. So we'll probably play to those a little bit more even this year than we did last year. And, I'll give you one quick example. Antoine Green, we told him emphatically he needed to get stronger. He needed to be a stronger football player going into the season. He's added some weight. His numbers in the weight room have gone up. He's running routes stronger. He's going to be healthier and more durable because of it. And so just that in itself is just a small example, one thing. But Antoine has done a great job developing himself physically this year. So right off the bat, we know we're getting a stronger receiver. And we identify things with Bo and the rest of the guys. And, that's their job right now, is to improve on those areas. And so you're excited to have guys back that you know their specific strengths, and to have guys back that are going to help create depth. And then lastly, I'd say, especially in that room, and we're harping on the receivers, to have guys back that do a great job playing the game with each other and teaching each other and challenging each other. That means that bodes well for it being a really, really productive group for the 2020 season. And our O-line are the same. I think our running backs should be the same.
Yeah, we got 4 more hands raised. Let's blow through them so we can get Coach on his way. So Kiera, go ahead.
Hi, Coach. Can you talk about how you've been implementing parents into your accountability of your players, and how you're relying on them to make sure that your athletes are staying the course and staying focused?
You know, that's an interesting question. That's a good one, though. The parental involvement is the same that it always is, but we're emphasizing it more. You know, I always say in the offense, we have the ability to do whatever we need to do in the offense to win a ball game. But every year, from one year to the next, you emphasize a different area of it. I mean, if a quarterback can run, you might run him more. If we can go deep with speed, then we might do that more. But it all exists in the plan. We just emphasize what works for our players the most. So when I'm addressing the parental question, the parents, they're in the development plan for their sons in our program. One, because Mac Brown includes the families. And so, and he preaches family all the time. And this, I'm not saying I've never been anywhere that doesn't incorporate the family or have a family type atmosphere. I have, but I've never been anywhere where it's addressed so often. And it legitimately is that way every single day that we're in the office. We include mom and dad anytime there's something to address with the son, with the exception of playing time. And so the reason I brought up the emphasis issue with the offense is right now, we don't see them face to face. We're not looking at them eye to eye. We can't communicate with them in person. And so we have emphasized the role of the parents in this whole process more now than ever, and more now than I've ever included them in my career, because I've never been through a quarantine before, as most of us have. So yeah, like I've talked to Mr. and Mrs. Copenhaver, just as one example, more in the last couple of weeks than I have since I recruited their son. You know, since we recruited their son, and they are a lot more involved with making sure their son is taking the online classes and doing the workouts. Now the good thing is we haven't needed parental help to push kids to do things they're supposed to be doing, because we have such a high character locker room right now. We have a lot of leadership. You know, situations like this have a tendency to reveal who you're really working with. And I think right now we're finding out who some of the true leaders in our locker room are. We're finding out who the real workers are. We're finding out who's going to do the things they need to when we're not looking. And in the few instances where that's in question, you know, parents and family members have played a much bigger role. And so I think that's probably the best way to answer the question.
Jonathan Alexander, you are up.
Hey, Phil. I know there are a lot of high expectations for Sam, you know, given the year that he had during his freshman year. What would be the ideal step for him to take in year 2, you think?
The ideal step for him to do what?
In year 2.
To improve on, or what?
Yeah, to improve on. Yeah.
You know, there's some areas where he really did a great job. There's others where he did a good job. And then there's some things that individual plays that I would be disappointed in, that he also is disappointed in. And so what we've done is we've made a negative cut up tape, and we've gone through it. We're getting ready to do that again next week. We go through all the things that he didn't do well, all the things that kept him from being closer to perfect. You're never going to be perfect, but that's what you're striving for all the time. And so we are harping hard on, you know, he throws 4 verticals really well. We're not working on a lot of that right now. Okay, we're going to do enough to maintain the level that he's at that play, but there are other things that he can do right now, other plays that we can progress to faster, different things he can identify better. You know, one small example is we had a lot of we had a couple free routes this year, that maybe 7 of them to be exact, that he didn't throw. So I would want one of the improvements between last year and this year to be, if they give us 7 more this year, take them. I would want him to throw them this year. And so I don't know that there are any major concerns with Sam, but playing quarterback, you can always get better at every aspect of play. And that's what we're doing right now. We're trying to address the biggest weaknesses, take the weak link and move it forward. And then what happens is your overall package just gets stronger. Same way you develop an offense, same way you develop an entire football team. I know that's kind of vague, but that really is, that's the process we're going through right now.
Thank you.
Andrew, you're up.
Coach, you mentioned Awesome Richards at left tackle, and you spoke a little bit about center. You got Jordan Tucker at right tackle, Azudu, McKeithen, and Montilus that played a lot at guard. Who else do you envision maybe having a chance to contend to get in that group that you guys trust going into the UCF game? And how many guys do you think on the offensive line do you anticipate that you got that as a staff you guys will trust going into the opener?
You know, the magic number for me has always been 8. I would like to have 3 tackles that we feel like can start at any point in a football game. You want to have 3 guards that can start at any point in a football game. And you obviously want to have at least 2 centers. So in a perfect world, in my mind, you have 8 guys that you feel comfortable with playing. We can roll through those 8 players. And just like we were talking about, Andrew, with the receivers, keeping Diami fresh, we want to keep our tackles and our guards fresh. We want to make sure that if something happens to our starting center, much like it did last year, that you have another guy that can play without losing any momentum offensively, because that's obviously where the ball starts on every play. So that anything above 8 is icing. Anything above 8 gives us even more depth. It's not a scenario that happens. At Sam Houston State, I had 10. At Ole Miss, we had 7 to 8, depending on the health of our team, you know, and it goes back. So I've been in all of the different scenarios. I think we're in a really good position right now to have the 8 that I would love to have this season. Ty Murray is one of those names. William Barnes at guard would be one of those names. Ed Montilus, who started a number of games for us last year, would be another name. I have no idea if Awesome will be our left tackle. It might be Easy. It might be Jordan Tucker. Whoever does the best job at left tackle is going to play there. What I do like is we have a number of offensive linemen who I think are getting close to the standard that we need them to be at that position in order to play, which helps us create depth. We're not going to play a guy just because he's the next guard if he's not good enough. We're going to play the next best lineman and make sure he can play guard. We always want our best 5 on the field all the time. And this year, I think we have a chance to hit that 8-player mark and be in a legitimate situation to have a real 2 deep at each position. So that's kind of the goal, and I think we have a shot to get there. Now, a large part of that was predicated on developing a few of those guys physicality-wise in the spring. So that's going to be a challenge with the O-line to get them where we need them to be physically before we fly out to Florida.
As a quick follow-up, how much further ahead are you with that group now than you were this time a year ago?
You know, I always try to be positive, but I don't know if we could have been any worse off than we were at O-line last spring. And I don't feel that way now. You know, we have a lot of things we want to get better at on an individual basis at that position. We have some things we want to continue to improve on as an overall unit when we're out there. But it was not an impressive unit when we got here. Not athletically, not strength-wise. And then obviously we're teaching him a new offense. So I didn't think we had – I thought that was our biggest deficit, our weakest room overall going into the spring. Thankfully, to Coach Hess, we are in a much different world physically right now and athletically. And then because of the year of experience, and we did play 6, 7, 8 guys during the fall, and those guys are intelligent. They've done a good job learning the offense. You know, I'm not ready to say that it's going to be one of the better lines in college football, but we're a heck of a lot closer to where we would like to be at that position now than we were at this time last year. So I think our staff has done a really good job developing those guys in the year that we've had them.
All right, gang, last one with Mark and Charlie.
Coach, I just had to know a little bit more about that rising at 4:30 and hitting the heavy bag routine. How long have you been doing that, and what time do you go to bed at night?
What's that about the heavy bag? The heavy
Well,
bag?
Yeah, rising at 4:30 and hitting a heavy bag at 5 a.m. is a bit extreme. How long have you had that kind of routine?
Oh, I thought you were asking about the heavy bag program for our linemen. Mine, I don't know, it's I like getting up early. I get a lot of work done. If I don't work out in the morning, I'm not going to get anything done during the day because I have a hard time breaking the day in half and going to work out at lunchtime. So I just get it done in the morning. It wakes me up, and then it's just the way I started. I made a decision just to keep that routine going because if I started getting up at 8, like my 9-year-old, it'd be real hard to get back into the groove. So I just kind of stayed in my routine. That's easier for me.